Welcome back, focused learners. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here for another explainer today because we are jumping right into a high-stakes, absolutely intense world. We're going to be looking at the historical fiction of Ricardo Gómez, specifically his works set in Iberia between the years 1400 and 1500. Now, usually when we think about surviving the Inquisition, our minds immediately go straight to Hollywood imagery, right? Secret underground tunnels, hidden rooms behind bookcases, desperate families fleeing in the dead of night. But Gómez's novels show us a totally different, much more meticulous, and arguably way more terrifying method of survival. It's a battle that wasn't fought with swords, but with stamps, signatures, and filing cabinets. Okay, let's dive right into this.
I want you to really think about this for a second. How do you survive when your very existence is suddenly deemed illegal? Because in 15th century Iberia, marginalized communities like conversos, Jews, and Moriscos were facing exactly this life-or-death dilemma. The state and the church were actively and aggressively closing the walls in around them. Every single action was scrutinized. Every neighbor was a potential informer just looking to curry favor with the authorities. If running away wasn't an option and fighting back meant certain death, what did they actually do? How do you outsmart an entire empire that's actively hunting you down?
Well, that brings us to part one, the bureaucracy of survival and the lethal weapon of ink and parchment.
Ricardo Gómez does this absolutely brilliant thing where he transforms completely dry, boring documents like tax ledgers, property records, shipping manifests into a terrifying game of cat and mouse. You see, the real battlefield wasn't just out in the cobblestone streets. It was in the counting houses and the notary offices. To survive, marginalized people had to rely on a strategy called paper armor. It's basically the deliberate creation of flawless official documentation, whether that's entirely forged or just heavily curated, to shield a person's true identity from state persecution. People used a quote-unquote properly documented life as a literal shield. They weren't just passively hiding in the shadows, they were actively constructing this impeccable, legally binding fake reality on paper, just to prove they were exactly who the Inquisition demanded them to be. And let me tell you, creating this armor was a full-time, incredibly dangerous job.
Which leads us to part two, the Inquisition's ledger. This is all about when those written records become actual traps.
In Gómez's novel The Physician's Proof, we're introduced to Ishak. He's a Jewish physician living in 1415 Seville, and he relies on advanced Arabic medical texts to treat his patients. He's living in a world where the walls are rapidly, violently closing in, and this profound atmosphere of paranoia is just settling over the entire city. Look at the timeline here. In 1415, the Disputation of Tortosa forced these mass theological debates that were really just meant to coerce mass conversions. Fast forward a bit, and by 1478, the Spanish Inquisition is formally and institutionally established. And then boom, by 1492, the Alhambra decree expels the Jewish community entirely. Year by year, law by law, decree by decree, the state systematically narrowed the space for these marginalized communities to exist, practically squeezing them out of public life altogether. Because of these rapidly closing walls, Ishak finds himself facing a lethal dilemma between two totally distinct types of knowledge. On one side, you have neighborhood knowledge. This is safe, it's shared orally in whispers, kept in trusted circles. Everyone in the neighborhood knows Ishak uses Arabic texts, just like they know a local family uses olive oil during Lent instead of pork fat. It's an open secret, right? But the very second that information crosses over into archive knowledge, like when an investigator or a notary actually writes it down in an ecclesiastical court, it becomes lethal. A simple drop of olive oil or a medical book is suddenly transformed into a fatal permanent written record that can literally be used to execute a whole family. In this world, the written word was essentially a loaded gun.
All right, moving on to part three, encoding the mapmaker's secrets, or hiding truth right in plain sight.
Let's jump forward a bit to 1450 Mallorca in the novel The Mapmaker's Confession. Siona is a brilliant cartographer running a busy workshop, and she literally has the Inquisition knocking at her door, demanding to inspect her reference materials. So how does she protect her community's history when the authorities are actively tearing through her home? Well, it's a fascinating process. First, she collects oral maritime history from safe pilots, gathering all those hidden routes, safe harbors, and treacherous currents that were only known to the Jewish and Muslim sailors who had been forced out of official naval roles. Next, she uses that exact knowledge to draw the official Portolan chart, which is this incredibly accurate, highly valuable navigation map commissioned by the state. But finally, and this is the genius part, she embeds a hidden cipher deep in the decorative margins. Marginalized communities were literally encoding their survival and their generational knowledge directly into the official navigation maps of the very empire that was trying to erase them.
And this brilliantly illustrates one of the core themes of Gómez's work. What survives is what is legible to the people doing the preserving. It is a massive historical mismatch. The institutions of the Inquisition could only read one tradition at a time. When they looked at Siona's work, all they saw was a perfectly drawn map that would help their ships navigate the Mediterranean. They completely lacked the cultural context to read the hidden ciphers disguised as compass roses or little wave patterns. And because of that immense institutional blind spot, marginalized communities could hide their histories and their truths right under the noses of the authorities.
Now for Part 4, Forging the Paper Crown and the True Cost of a Perfect Record.
By the 1490s, in the novel The Paper Crown, the authorities were getting much, much stricter. We follow a wealthy merchant named Gonzalo Palencia, who's secretly holding on to his Jewish roots, and a fallen noble named Luis del Toro. They end up facing a terrifying bureaucratic nightmare surrounding one single, seemingly simple number, 3. A new draconian mandate had just come down from the Archbishop of Toledo. To secure their social status, protect their wealth, and quite literally just to survive, families now had to prove 3 generations of verified Christian history. 3 entire generations of flawless baptismal records, marriage contracts, and acceptable business dealings. One single missing piece of paper could mean absolute ruin.
This impossible mandate led to a chilling realization for our characters. As Gomez writes, the true books would burn while forgeries took their place. Think about how agonizing that would be. To survive, families were forced to make the decision to literally erase their actual histories. Grandfathers' ledgers, meticulously kept family trees, quiet accounts of ritual celebrations, all the tangible proof of who they really were had to go straight into the fire. And in their place, they had to construct completely fake, impeccable registries. They had to destroy their own past just to secure their future.
The lengths these men went to in order to build this paper armor is just staggering. For instance, when a suspicious investigator gets a little too close to uncovering their secrets, Luis actually murders him in cold blood. But what ends up going into the harbor master's official ledger? Accidental death on a deteriorating pier, a tragic mishap. When they're secretly observing Jewish rituals at home, their paper reality shows a highly documented history of consistent, generous Catholic chapel visits and tithes. When they're literally smuggling hidden vulnerable populations out of the country, on paper, it's logged as just a series of mundane, lawful property and cargo transfers between merchants. They essentially got away with murder and saved countless lives simply by ensuring that absolutely everything was perfectly, properly documented for the state's clerks.
Finally, we arrive at Part 5, the Paper Armor Legacy. What do our archives actually say about us?
What's truly amazing about Gomez's writing is how seamlessly he connects these 15th century struggles straight to the present day. Because paper armor wasn't just a temporary shield against the Inquisition, it became an inherited generational trait. In the preface of The Paper Crown, the narrative abruptly shifts to the year 2024 in Bogotá, Colombia. We meet a woman named Cuchu who is trying to prove her ancestry for a Spanish citizenship application. She gets her hands on a scanned document written in Portuguese notarial script all the way back from 1492. But because she actually has a modern background in banking and auditing, she starts noticing some truly bizarre anomalies in the ancient ink. She spots financial numbers that add up just a little too perfectly to be real commerce. She finds 3 wavy lines that look like accidental water damage, but upon closer inspection, they're entirely deliberate. She notices repeating clusters of dots cleverly disguised as official notarial stamps. It wasn't decoration, and it wasn't damage. It was literally her ancestors speaking directly to her through hidden information. In that moment, it hits Cuchu. She suddenly remembers this piece of wisdom she inherited from her grandmother: 3 ways to read everything. Her ancestors had kept 3 sets of books, trusting absolutely no one with the complete truth. This paper armor strategy had survived for over 500 years. It was passed down through the centuries across oceans, basically as a quiet, unspoken reflex to always keep your papers perfect and always have a secondary story ready, just in case you ever needed to prove who you were to a hostile authority.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Look back at your own digital and physical footprint today. If you had to survive a century of silence, what would your paper trail say about you? Would it tell the honest truth of who you are, what you love, and what you believe? Or would it just be the flawless armor you built to survive in a world that's watching your every move? Ricardo Gomez's historical fiction completely redefines how we look at history, survival, and the deeply compromised archives that we inevitably leave behind. I absolutely highly recommend picking up his work to see this incredible narrative unfold for yourself. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.